A woman escaping her toxic marriage, boarded the wrong plane, and sat beside a mysterious man who turned out to be a millionaire CEO. "If you open your mouth one more time, I swear I will not spare you. I am just begging you. Please let me go just this once." The glass shattered before she could even blink. Emma flinched as his hand came down hard across her face, her cheek instantly aflame. She tasted blood. Her knees buckled, but she stayed upright for one reason alone. "Mommy?" A small voice quivered from the hallway. Their 5-year-old daughter, Lily, clutched a teddy bear, eyes wide, lips trembling. She had seen it. All of it. Emma's husband, Michael, turned sharply toward the child, the rage in his eyes cooling into something darker. Contempt. "Go back to bed," he barked. Lily whimpered and disappeared down the hall, sobs barely muffled by her tiny hands. Emma wanted to cry, but her tears had dried long ago. She pressed her palm to her swollen cheek and stared at the man who once swore to protect her. There was nothing left of that promise, only bruises and silence. That night, as the house grew quiet and Michael passed out in his study with a half-empty bottle of bourbon beside him, Emma stood in the bathroom, staring into the mirror. The fluorescent light flickered above her. She traced the purple bruise along her jaw, the dried blood at the corner of her mouth. But the wound that hurt most wasn't visible. It was buried under years of isolation, threats, and the slow erosion of who she used to be. She remembered the first time he told her she was worthless, the first time he accidentally locked her phone away for days, the first time he grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave a bruise, then apologized with flowers. Now there were no more flowers, only fear, only silence, only the cold, hollow echo of, "You brought this on yourself." Emma pressed her fingers to her lips to keep from screaming. She couldn't wake Lily, not tonight. If she didn't leave now, she never would. She moved quietly, her bare feet soft on the hardwood floor. Every creak in the stairs made her heart race. In the bedroom, she stuffed a small duffel bag, just the essentials. Clothes for Lily, her passport, an old prepaid phone hidden in a shoebox behind her closet. She grabbed Lily's favorite blanket, the one with the stars, and folded it tightly. She crept into her daughter's room. The little girl was curled up, thumb in her mouth, the teddy bear tucked under her arm. Emma leaned down, her voice barely a whisper. "Sweetheart, we're going on a little adventure." Lily stirred. "Is Daddy coming?" Emma's voice caught. "No, baby, just us." Within minutes, they were outside, the night air biting against their skin. Emma's hands trembled as she buckled Lily into the back seat of her car. She did not let herself look back at the house. She drove through the suburbs without headlights for the first 10 minutes, heart pounding, every pair of headlights behind her sparking panic. Her original plan had been to drive straight to her sister's home in Oregon. But fear clouded her judgment. What if he tracked her phone? What if he guessed where she was going? At a gas station 2 towns over, Emma made a snap decision. She would fly. It was safer, faster, harder to follow. She paid cash at the airport, clutching Lily's hand with one arm and her duffel bag in the other. The attendant gave her the only remaining seat on the next flight out. "Gate C-23, the woman said. "Boarding in 20 minutes. Emma didn't ask where the flight was going. She just nodded and kept moving. Lily was sleepy, clinging to her mother like a kitten. Her small fingers curled around Emma's scarf. At the gate, Emma finally glanced at the boarding pass. Her stomach flipped. Colorado Springs, that was not Oregon. But there was no time to change, no time to think. Michael could already be looking. She tightened her grip on Lily and boarded the plane. The cabin lights were dimmed. Emma moved down the aisle with her head low, flinching when the flight attendant greeted her. Her seat was at the back. She settled Lily against the window seat, tucking the starry blanket around her small frame. Only when Lily began to breathe softly did Emma allow herself a moment to breathe too. If I had not left tonight, maybe tomorrow, I would not be alive. She had no idea where they were going, but she knew what they had left behind, and that was enough. For now. "Excuse me, can I sit here? The plane's full." Emma looked up, startled. The man was tall, maybe in his mid-30s, wearing a plain gray sweater and jeans. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he had run his hands through it too many times. There was a quiet exhaustion in his voice, but not rudeness, just weariness. She shifted slightly. "Of course," she murmured. He offered a tight nod and slid into the seat beside her, adjusting a slim leather carry-on under the seat in front of him. For a few seconds there was only the hum of the plane around them, the shuffle of other passengers finding their seats, and Lily's soft breathing against the window. Emma tugged her scarf higher, pulling it over the bruise on her cheek. The fabric scratched slightly against her skin, but she didn't care. She had become used to hiding. Out of the corner of her eye, she could feel him glance at her, not prying, just aware. She shifted again, trying to turn toward Lily more, shielding her face in the shadows. The plane doors closed with a soft thud. The captain's voice crackled overhead. "Final checks, cabin crew instructions." Emma heard none of it. She gripped the armrest tightly as the plane began to taxi. Her heart beat faster, not from fear of flying, but from the weight of everything she had just done. She was leaving, running, hiding, with her child, with bruises still fresh on her skin and fear still tangled in her breath. The plane lifted off the ground, a gentle shudder coursing through the cabin. Emma looked out the window and blinked, and then the tears came. She didn't mean to cry. She had been strong all night, for Lily, for herself, but the sight of the city lights fading beneath the clouds, the finality of it all, it broke something inside her. She raised her hand quickly to cover her face, but it was too late. The man beside her didn't speak. He didn't turn toward her with awkward sympathy or ask invasive questions. He simply reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded tissue and held it out to her. Emma hesitated, then took it. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave a quiet nod and looked straight ahead. They sat in silence for several minutes. Emma wiped her eyes, embarrassed by her own display. She tried to compose herself, taking long, slow breaths. Lily stirred slightly, then nestled deeper into her blanket, oblivious. The man didn't speak again, but his presence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt grounded, steady, as if he understood the need for quiet. She glanced at him briefly. His eyes were fixed on the tray in front of him, unreadable, but there was a sadness there, something she recognized, not the loud kind, but the quiet, well-worn kind, a sadness that lived in the bones. "You're traveling alone?" she asked, surprising even herself. He turned slightly, his eyes meeting hers. "Yeah." His voice was low, calm. It wasn't cold, it just didn't ask for attention. Emma nodded. "Me too, sort of." He glanced at the child beside her and gave a soft, understanding smile. "She your daughter?" "Yes," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Lily, she's 5. She sleeps like someone who knows she's safe," he said gently. Emma felt her throat tighten again. She looked down, brushing a hand across Lily's forehead. "I hope so." Silence returned, but it was different this time. Not awkward, not heavy. It was the kind of silence shared by people who don't need to fill every space with noise. Emma turned toward the window, letting the engine's low hum lull her mind. Her fingers still clutched the tissue in her lap. The man beside her rested his head back, closing his eyes. Neither of them spoke again for the rest of the first hour. But something had shifted, something small, almost imperceptible. Two strangers, both carrying their own storms, had found themselves beside each other in the sky. Not by choice, but maybe not entirely by accident either. As the plane touched down, the lights of the small airport flickered through the window like distant beacons. Emma stirred Lily gently, whispering soft encouragements as the girl rubbed her eyes and yawned, still wrapped in her blanket. The moment they stepped off the aircraft, a wave of reality hit Emma hard. She had no plan, no working phone, its battery had died somewhere between security and the departure gate, no clear destination anymore. Her sister's address, scribbled on a wrinkled receipt, was in another state, and she had boarded the wrong flight in panic. People hurried past her in the terminal, reunited with family, calling ride shares, heading home. Emma stood still, lost. David noticed. He paused beside her near the baggage claim, his hands in his coat pockets. "You waiting for someone?" She hesitated, lips parting, then closing again. Finally, she shook her head. "No, I made a mistake. This isn't where I was supposed to go." He looked at her, really looked at her, and then, gently, he said, "If you don't have anywhere to go, I know a place." Emma stiffened. I don't know. It's not a city," he added quickly. "Just a farm, about an hour's drive, quiet, secluded, no one knows about it. You and your daughter would be safe there, at least until you figure things out." She looked at him, eyes narrowing. "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" He met her gaze, unflinching. "Because I've been a stranger needing shelter before. Someone helped me. I'm just passing it on." She didn't reply right away, but as Lily clung to her hand, shivering in the cold, Emma weighed her options. A quiet place. Away from people. Away from him. She nodded, slowly. "Okay." The drive was quiet. Lily fell asleep again in the back seat of David's old SUV, her small body curled under Emma's coat. Emma sat in the front, clutching her backpack, watching the night blur past the window. David didn't make small talk, didn't press, just drove through winding back roads, headlights cutting through the dark like ribbons of promise. The farm appeared like a dream, hidden behind a row of pine trees, nestled at the foot of a gentle hill. A modest farmhouse with whitewashed wood and warm yellow lights glowing from the windows. Wildflowers lined the path and a breeze stirred the grass, even in the stillness of night. David helped carry Lily inside while Emma took in the scent of fresh earth, old wood, and something faintly floral. "This is home?" she asked softly. "For now," he replied. "There's a guest room upstairs. Clean sheets. I'll grab you some tea." Emma had not expected the warmth that seeped into her bones as she stepped inside. The fireplace crackled. A kettle whistled softly on the stove. A quilt was already laid out on the couch, and books lined the walls. She had not expected kindness. Lily was already asleep again, curled under the covers in the guest bed. Emma wandered back downstairs, intending to say thank you, but the warmth, the quiet, the exhaustion all caught up to her. She sank into a chair at the kitchen table and leaned her head on her arm, just for a second, and slipped into sleep. When David returned, he found her like that, fast asleep, her coat slipping off her shoulders, revealing deep bruises blooming down one arm. The collar of her blouse had shifted, exposing a scrape on her shoulder, red and raw. He stood still for a moment. Then, quietly, he set down the tea. He opened a cabinet, retrieved a small tin of antiseptic cream, and walked over with slow steps. Kneeling beside her, he gently touched her arm, careful not to wake her. She flinched slightly, but didn't stir. With infinite tenderness, he dabbed the cream onto the open wound, then smoothed a sterile pad over it. He did the same with the bruises, hands steady, expression unreadable. Emma stirred, her eyes blinked open, dazed. Their eyes met. David froze. She looked down at her arm, saw the open tin of ointment in his hand, and her heart stumbled in her chest. "You were... I'm sorry," he said, backing away slightly. "I saw the bruises. I didn't want them to get worse. I shouldn't have..." She sat up, covering herself quickly with her scarf. Her cheeks flushed, a mix of shame and something else. "No," she said softly. "Thank you." Silence stretched between them, awkward but not uncomfortable. Then she looked at him, really looked at him. The shadows under his eyes, the way his brow was always slightly furrowed, like someone who carried weight in his chest he never spoke of. "Why are you here?" she asked suddenly. David blinked. "You mean the farm?" She nodded. He hesitated. "It's a long story." Emma gave a tired smile. "We have time." And in that pause, longer than a breath, quieter than a heartbeat, something passed between them. Not quite trust, not yet love, but the first spark of something new. Two broken people, in a quiet house, in a forgotten place, and for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt quite so alone. Emma sat on the back porch of the farmhouse as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with smudges of orange and lavender. Lily was inside, drawing quietly by the fireplace. The air smelled of earth and pine, and for once it did not carry fear. David stepped out with 2 mugs of chamomile tea. He handed one to her and took the seat beside her, careful not to intrude on her silence. For a long time they said nothing, just sipped and listened to the crickets. Emma stared out toward the open field, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. Then her voice, soft and cracked, broke the stillness. "I never thought I'd actually run," she said. David looked at her but didn't respond. He waited. Emma's fingers trembled slightly. At first it was just words, yelling, then throwing things, then slaps, then worse. She swallowed hard. It made sure no one saw the bruises. He'd apologize afterward, buy toys for Lily, promise he'd change. But it never stopped. He controlled everything, who I talked to, when I could leave, what I wore. I stopped seeing friends. My family thought I was just busy. Her voice faltered. There was a night. He came home drunk. I was 6 months pregnant. He thought I was hiding money. Said I was planning to leave. He dragged me by the hair, slammed the door on my shoulder. Her hands gripped the mug tightly. I lost the baby 2 days later. David's expression didn't change, but his knuckles turned white where he held the mug. Emma looked away, blinking fast. No one believed me. The hospital report said natural complications. He told everyone I'd fallen on the stairs, and I almost believed it myself, that it was my fault, that if I was better, quieter, more obedient. Her voice broke. David reached out but paused, letting his hand hover beside hers on the porch rail. Emma noticed. She slid her fingers toward his. Slowly, they touched. "I stayed for Lily," she whispered. "But last week, he hit me in front of her. She screamed. She tried to cover me with her little arms." A tear slipped down Emma's cheek. "I knew I had to leave, even if it meant hiding. Even if it meant starting with nothing." David turned toward her fully now. His voice was quiet, steady. "You did the bravest thing a person can do." Emma gave a hollow laugh. "I feel like a coward." "You're not," he said firmly. "Cowards don't protect others. Cowards don't run toward freedom when the price is everything they know." She looked at him, really looked. "You speak like someone who understands." David exhaled slowly. "I do." He set down his mug and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. For a moment he stared at the ground, gathering pieces of himself. "My sister's name was Amelia," he said. "Smart, funny. She used to sing to herself while she worked. She loved astronomy. Could name constellations in the middle of the day." Emma listened, still and focused. She was dating this guy, charming on the outside. Everyone thought he was a catch, but behind closed doors, it was hell, emotional abuse, gaslighting. He isolated her from us, told her she was crazy, useless, broken. David's jaw clenched. I didn't see the signs until it was too late. I was too busy building a startup, traveling, chasing funding rounds and board approvals. She called me one night crying. I said I'd call her back. I never did. A heavy pause. She overdosed 3 days later. They said it was accidental. I know it wasn't. Emma pressed a hand to her mouth, tears welling again. I stepped down as CEO the next month. I couldn't look at another number or investor report. I sold everything I didn't need. Bought this place. Came out here to figure out how to breathe again. Emma reached for him then. No hesitation. She wrapped her arms around him, trembling. He held her back, his arms strong and gentle, their shared sorrow binding them tighter than words ever could. They stayed like that for a long time. Two broken hearts, stitched together by the silence between them. Not as lovers, not yet, but as survivors. As souls who had walked through fire and lived to tell the story. When they finally pulled apart, David looked into her eyes. You don't have to tell more unless you're ready, but just know, here, no one will ever hurt you again. Emma wiped her tears with the back of her hand and nodded. For the first time in years, she believed it. And somewhere, deep beneath the bruises and fear and grief, hope flickered back to life. Emma stood frozen in the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the article on David's open laptop. She had only meant to close the screen after bringing him tea, but the headline screamed at her in bold black letters, "Disappeared Billionaire, the Silent Fall of Tech Prodigy David Whitmore." Her eyes scanned the page, heart pounding harder with each line. It detailed everything: how David had co-founded a revolutionary AI startup that had reshaped the industry, how he was hailed as a genius, a visionary, a future titan. Then came the tragedy: his sister's death, the company scandal, the sudden resignation. He had vanished from the public eye without explanation. Rumors abounded. Some said he was hiding, others whispered of a breakdown. And now, here he was, living in a quiet farmhouse, helping her, a woman running from nothing but pain. She didn't even hear him walk in. "Emma?" David's voice was gentle. "Is everything all right?" She turned, startled, her face flushed as she stepped back from the laptop. "I didn't mean to pry, I just saw the—" "It's okay," he interrupted, his eyes soft. "You were bound to find out eventually." Emma hesitated, then asked, her voice tight, "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" David looked down. "Because I didn't want that to matter." She crossed her arms, wounded and wary. "And yet it does. You're someone the whole world knows. I'm just a woman who barely escaped with her child in a suitcase." "You're not just anything, Emma." "Then why?" she asked, voice rising. "Why did you help me? Why bring me here? What do you want from me?" David took a step closer but kept his distance. "Nothing. I don't want anything. I just—" He exhaled slowly. "I wanted someone to see me without seeing all that. Without the money, the title, the tragedy. I thought, maybe you could—" Her jaw tightened, her breath shaky. "Well, maybe I can't." Silence stretched between them like a taut wire, ready to snap. Emma's voice softened but cracked. "You're kind, David. You gave me and Lily peace when we had none. But now I know who you are, and I—" She looked down, blinking fast. "I don't belong in your world. I was never meant to. You belong wherever you feel safe." Emma gave a hollow laugh. "You don't understand. I've spent so long feeling worthless, like I had to beg just to breathe, and now, standing next to someone like you, it only reminds me how small I still feel." David's voice was low. "I never meant to make you feel that way." "I know," she whispered. "But it doesn't change the truth." She turned away, biting her lip hard, like she was holding back more than just words. "I should go." David didn't move. His throat tightened, but he nodded once. "If that's what you need." She expected him to ask her to stay. He didn't. It hurt more than she imagined. The next morning, Emma packed quietly while Lily slept. She left a note on the kitchen table. Just 2 lines. "Thank you for everything. I hope you find peace too." David found it later that day. He sat at the table, her empty teacup still on the counter, her scent lingering in the air. He didn't cry. He just sat still for a long time, eyes locked on the note, fingers brushing the paper as if he could feel her presence through it. He told himself she needed space, that he had no right to hold her here. But as the sun set and the farmhouse echoed with silence, he realized something else. He missed her laugh. He missed Lily's footsteps on the wooden floor. He missed the feeling of not being alone. That night, David walked out onto the porch, staring into the distance where her silhouette had once stood watching the stars, and for the first time since Amelia's death, he whispered into the dark, "I want her back." The next day, he made a few calls and began to search. The shelter smelled faintly of lavender and disinfectant. Emma clutched Lily's small hand as they stepped through the glass doors, both of them wrapped in second-hand coats and a kind of quiet exhaustion that ran deeper than any bruises. "This way, Ms. Turner," the intake coordinator said gently, leading them into a warm, softly lit room. A mural of painted sunflowers covered the far wall, sunlight bursting from behind their petals. For the first time in weeks, Emma let herself exhale. Over the next few days, the center became more than a refuge. It became the first place in years where Emma didn't feel hunted. The staff provided legal support, counseling, even school enrollment for Lily. At night, Emma sat on a cot beside her daughter's bed, listening to her soft breathing, feeling the weight of survival finally start to lift. The divorce hearing came quickly. Emma stood in front of the judge, hands shaking, her voice steady despite it. She had gathered records, photos, even a statement from a former neighbor who had once called the police on her husband. The judge listened. The courtroom was silent as Emma described years of being isolated, demeaned, controlled, and the final blow that forced her to run. Her husband never even showed up. When the ruling came down, full custody awarded to Emma, along with a restraining order, she didn't cry in the courtroom. She waited until she and Lily were outside, sitting on the courthouse steps, sunlight warm on their faces. "Mama, are we really free now?" Lily asked, her voice soft and unsure. Emma wrapped her arms around her daughter and whispered, "Yes, baby, we are." For the first time, it was the truth. Weeks passed. Emma began volunteering at the shelter that had saved them. She started small, helping organize supplies, cleaning rooms, reading stories to the children while their mothers spoke with counselors. But word spread about her courage, her resilience. Women gravitated toward her, drawn by the quiet strength in her eyes, the way she listened without judgment. Soon, she was leading peer groups, sharing her story, and they listened, some with tears, others with guarded hope. Emma never pretended to have all the answers, but she had something else, proof that escape was possible, that life after could still be life worth living. One afternoon, as she was sorting through donated clothes, one of the staff handed her a small envelope. "This came for you," they said. It was handwritten, no return address. Emma opened it slowly, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. The words were carefully written, uneven in places, as if the writer had hesitated between each sentence. "Dear Emma, you don't know me, but I know your story. I was in group 2 months ago, sitting in the back. You didn't see me cry, but I did. I never told anyone before about the things my husband did to me. I thought I had to stay. I thought it was too late. But after hearing you speak, I made a plan. I waited until he was at work. I took my son and I left. We're in another shelter now. It's not easy, but we're safe. I wanted you to know that. Thank you for being brave first. Because of you, I believed I could be brave too." Emma read the letter 3 times. Then she sat down on the edge of the storage bench and let the tears come. They were not tears of fear, not of sorrow, but of a joy so deep it ached. Lily found her there minutes later and climbed into her lap. Emma held her daughter close, the letter clutched in one hand, her heart full of something she had never expected to feel again. Purpose. She had once run through the night, unsure if she would survive. Now her voice had helped someone else find the morning. She was no longer just surviving, she was saving. The community center buzzed with soft conversation as people trickled in, taking seats in the modest hall. The folding chairs creaked, and the scent of coffee and cookies lingered in the air. At the front of the room, a banner read, "Rising from the Ashes, Stories of Survival." Emma stood near the podium, adjusting the microphone, her palms slightly damp. She had done this a dozen times now, but each time still felt like stepping onto thin ice, fragile, uncertain. Yet something inside her had shifted over the past months. Her voice had grown steadier, her gaze more certain. She was no longer telling her story for survival, she was telling it for others to believe they could survive too. Lily sat quietly in the front row, swinging her feet beneath the chair, beaming with pride. The moderator introduced Emma, and polite applause filled the room. She stepped forward, cleared her throat, and began. "My name is Emma Turner," she said, her voice calm, "and not so long ago, I thought I was invisible." She shared her journey, briefly, honestly. The silence, the control, the fear, then the night she chose to run. She did not embellish, did not dramatize. Her words landed like stones in still water, subtle but rippling deep. "I thought I had nothing," she said, her voice softening. "But I had one thing left. I had my daughter, and I had a choice." People listened, some with tears in their eyes, others with quiet nods of recognition. Emma took a breath, ready to close her speech, and then the moderator cleared his throat again. "We have one more guest speaker, someone who asked to share something. A surprise." Emma blinked, confused. That was not part of the plan. Then she saw him. He was walking down the aisle slowly, hands tucked into the pockets of a charcoal coat, the collar turned up slightly against the chill. His hair was a little longer than before, his eyes shadowed with emotion. "David." Emma's heart stopped. He stepped onto the stage and turned to face the crowd, his gaze sweeping once over the audience before resting on her. "My name is David Callahan," he said quietly, "and I used to be the CEO of one of the fastest-growing companies in the country." There was a murmur. People leaned in. "I had everything: power, prestige, a penthouse, and people who knew my name, but none of it meant anything. Not after I lost my sister. Not after I realized I could not protect the person I loved most from someone who claimed to love her." He paused, swallowing hard. "I disappeared after that. I left the city, the business. I lived in silence. And then, one day, on a plane I never meant to board, I sat beside a woman who was carrying her entire life in a backpack and a blanket of bruises." Emma covered her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. David turned to her directly now, the room fading around them. She did not cry, not at first. She just looked out the window like she was already gone. But when she finally did cry, she reminded me what courage looks like. He stepped closer, his voice low but clear. She said, "I saved her life, but the truth is, she saved mine." Then, slowly, David knelt on one knee. Not with a ring, not with a promise of forever, but with raw, trembling sincerity. "I did not come here to ask for your love," he said. "I came here to ask for your chance, a chance to start again, to walk beside you, to know your daughter, to earn your trust, not because you owe me anything, but because my heart stayed behind the day you walked away." Tears streamed down Emma's cheeks. The room was silent, breathless. Emma stepped forward slowly, every part of her trembling. She looked down at him, into the eyes that had once seen her at her lowest without flinching. "You found me," she whispered. David nodded. "I never stopped looking." She dropped to her knees in front of him, her arms wrapping around his neck. He held her tightly, not as a savior, not as a CEO, but as a man who had found something rare and would never let it go again. Lily ran onto the stage, throwing her arms around them both, and the room erupted into applause, not the kind reserved for success, but for redemption. Love had returned, not as a fairy tale, but as something real, something earned. 1 year later, the morning sun rose slowly over the hills, casting golden light across the fields behind a modest 2-story farmhouse. The wooden sign at the entrance read in elegant letters, "The Second Chance Home." It was not just a shelter, it was a promise. The place buzzed softly with life. Children's laughter echoed from the backyard, wind chimes sang in the breeze, and fresh bread baked in the kitchen. Women moved through the hallways, some still carrying shadows in their eyes, but others beginning to smile again. David knelt in the garden with 2 kids beside him, their hands deep in soil as they planted wildflowers. His sleeves were rolled up, and there was dirt on his cheek. He had long since stepped away from boardrooms and cameras, finding peace instead in the slow rhythm of planting, fixing, teaching. Inside the house, Emma sat near the window with a cup of tea in one hand and a thick manuscript in the other. The cover read, "The Day I Chose to Live," by Emma Turner. The book had just gone to print. It told her story, not as a victim, but as a woman who had found her voice, her strength, and her purpose. It was already drawing attention from survivor groups, schools, talk shows, but Emma cared less about fame now. All she wanted was for someone out there, feeling alone and afraid, to read her words and believe in the possibility of another life. Today, however, was not about books or buildings. Today was about love. The backyard had been transformed. White chairs lined the grass. String lights twinkled between trees. A makeshift altar stood under a wooden arch wrapped in wildflowers. And sitting in those chairs were not high-profile guests or celebrities. Just women, children, volunteers, social workers. People who had found refuge here. People who had built something together. A chosen family. David stood near the altar, looking strangely handsome in a navy blue shirt and suspenders, his usual boots freshly polished. He rubbed his palms nervously. Emma appeared at the edge of the backyard, holding Lily's hand. She wore a simple ivory dress, soft and flowing, and a crown of fresh daisies braided into her hair. Her eyes found David's across the crowd, and everything else faded. As she walked toward him, Lily tugged on her hand and whispered, "Mom, I think today is magic." Emma smiled through her tears. "It really is." The ceremony was short, sweet, no grand speeches, just two people exchanging quiet vows beneath a sky that had once seemed so far away. After the kiss, as the crowd cheered and the music played, Lily stood on tiptoe to reach David's ear. "Can I tell you a secret?" she whispered. David leaned down, heart already full. Lily looked at him, eyes bright. "I don't have nightmares anymore, because now I know you're here. You're my dad now." David froze. Then he knelt slowly, eye level with her, tears springing to his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, voice cracking. "That's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever said to me." Lily wrapped her arms around his neck and he held her tight. Behind them, Emma watched, her heart overflowing. This was not the life she once dreamed of. It was better, messier, realer, built not from perfection, but from resilience, forgiveness, and something even deeper, hope. They had all survived storms, but now, in this little backyard, with cake on paper plates and kids chasing bubbles in the air, they were more than survivors. They were home. And when someone once asked Emma during a radio interview how she would describe her new family in one sentence, she had smiled and said, "We may not be perfect, but we are real." If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that even in the darkest chapters, healing is possible, that love can grow in the most unexpected places, then please, take a moment, like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and most importantly, subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories, where every tale is crafted to lift your spirit, heal your soul, and remind you that you are never alone. New stories every week, real people, real emotions, real love. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment that might just change your day or your life. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and keep believing in second chances. This is Soul-Stirring Stories, where every story is a journey home.